Welcome, everybody, to another Lilja and Lou's podcast. This time we are going to have some news for you, and we are going to review the movie Firestarter, which is an oldie that we have dusted off and watched. And we are going to review the latest story from King, Face in the Crowd. So stay with us for that.
Welcome, welcome. Do not fear the door that lies before you. We will protect you. We are your guides, Hans and Lou, and we will give you the latest in Stephen King news. But before we do so, you must prove yourself worthy. You must open the door and join us in the death room. Up first is the news, and our first news story of this podcast is, ta-da, we're talking a Dark Tower again. I can imagine that. This is like our Boy Who Cried Wolf story that we just keep coming back to with every podcast. And unfortunately, it looks like we're going to be going through another iteration of Dark Tower false starts and stops. But it looks like Warner has decided that the Dark Tower project is too risky, too rich for their blood, and understandably, because it is a gamble. So to do a 7-book series that does have a dedicated fan base, but it's not a super large fan base compared to other Stephen King books, so it's understandable. But Warner has decided to step away from the project, and for a while, for maybe like 30 seconds, it looked like the Dark Tower was without a home. But now there is a follow-up word that another company is looking at taking a shot at the Dark Tower, and that is Media Rights Capital. And Hans, between the two of us, we never really heard of the studio before, right?
No.
No. So we did a little bit of Googling, and we found out that because we were both under the impression they were probably like some sort of a B movie company, but they've actually got some high-profile projects in the last couple of years. They just had a big hit in North America with Ted, which is the Mark Wahlberg, Seth Rogen movie about a man with a teddy bear that walks and talks. And they also have Elysium, which is another big science fiction project coming up, which is Neil Blomkamp, if you remember from District 9. That's his next project with Matt Damon and Jodie Foster. So that looks interesting. And that's all we've heard so far. I haven't heard anything beyond that, the fact that they might be interested in it. Have you, Hans?
No, nothing more than that they are in talks of it. But you have to be nervous when so many companies are turning it down, and then another one is getting interested and turning it down. And so my guess is that it is probably too expensive to make a good version of it. And if it gets done, it will probably be a budget one, and probably not what we fans are expecting.
Right. And I mentioned this on one of our previous podcasts, and I can bring it up again, and I've actually grown quite fond of this idea. I really think that this project should be something that Pixar takes a shot at. Because I think, as you said, Hans, the costs of doing a live version of these 7 books, plus the fact of just trying to tie up the cast for 7 years, or how many years, if the 2 or 3 years they would take to film it, it just seems like a logistical nightmare. And while Pixar is still putting out really top quality products, I think they are ready for a challenge. And I just think that the marriage of Pixar with this project, if they could do like a almost photorealistic or very realistic version, animated version of the Dark Tower, I think that would be awesome. And it would solve so many problems for them. And for me, the biggest problem it would be the aging of Jake over the 7 movies, because he only really ages from about 10 to 11 in the story. And if you're going to do that live action, there's just no way that that kid is going to stay that age for the project. So, and I hate it when you have to age up the characters just to make the movie work. We saw that with the recent miniseries from A&E, The Bag of Bones. I thought it really hurt the story that the girl was just made a couple of years older than she should have been. So, anyhow, that's my pet wish that Pixar would step in and take a shot at it.
Yeah, I agree totally with you. I think that's really the only way to go with this one. I think if it's gonna cover all 7 books and be faithful for of them, I think that's the only way to go.
So that's the latest hot news from Dark Tower. And speaking of hot news,
exactly,
Hans?
we are going on with the news from the remake of Carrie. I think we have talked about this movie in every podcast so far, so let's keep that up. And this time we have actually gotten to see some photos from the remake, and it shows Carrie all bloody, and we also get to see a picture of Julianne Moore as the mother, and I must say I'm impressed with that one. I really like that one.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with the pictures. It really seems to have the vibe of the original version of the movie.
Yeah.
And the characters look like what we remember.
Yeah.
Now it's just a matter of seeing how they've managed to bring that story up to date to current times. But from a picture point of view, it's looking really good.
Yeah, one thing that's a little bit off, I think, is there was also pictures kind of behind the scenes photos from the set, in which you see Chloe without the blood, but still in her prom dress. And as many have commented on the Facebook page, is that she looks too pretty. Carrie wasn't really that pretty, so I'm a little bit afraid that it will be going through like these Twilight movies, and that they are beautiful young people just to show beautiful young people. So I'm a little bit skeptic about those pictures, but the one with the blood on, those I like. So
surprise.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's just the reality of making the movies. Like you have to. They want to. It's a convention that you're going to have attractive people casting these roles. So but still, it depends how they shoot her and how they light her and things like that. So she might look pretty, but she might not look as stunningly pretty as she does in those pictures. So we'll just have to see how they film it and light it. But that's not really bothering me, and I just kind of accept that as part of making movies. It's kind of like with the Dark Tower, you always come back to it, Hans. You don't want a big name star to play Roland. You prefer an unknown. But the financial reality of it is, if they do a live action version, they're going to have to get a big name star, because that's what's going to drive most of the financing. So and that's unfortunate. Which is another reason why if Pixar did it, that wouldn't be an issue either. So because they would all be unknowns.
And that's the good thing for me. I don't have to consider the money. I can just sit here and think and thought what I want. So
sure. Yeah, we all have our dream version of the movie. That's right. Just like we have our own version of the books in our head as well. So.
Exactly. But I'm sure we're going to come back to Carrie next episode as well. So.
Yeah, probably.
Yep.
Though filming is going to be finished soon, so we might be running out of news updates on that. But it'll be really interesting. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Might get the trailer soon. A short trailer.
Well, the movie doesn't come out till next year, so we might get it to the end of the year. Maybe we'll have to see.
Yeah.
So even though we're reviewing a news story by Stephen King, A Face in the Crowd, he also has another news story. So that's like 3 news stories within the last 3 podcasts that we've done.
Yeah.
And this one is Batman and Robin has Batman and Robin have an altercation, and it's in Harper, I believe, and it's not a long story. It's even shorter than A Face in the Crowd. So, but we will be reviewing that in our next podcast. So we're going to give everybody time to have a chance to read it before we do that. It's an interesting title, and that's all I'm going to say about it for now.
And what's interesting about this one is that it just popped up from nowhere. I got an email from someone who had bought the paper and found the story in it, and it was nowhere on the internet to be found. No information, nothing. So.
Oh, that's Stephen King.
Yeah.
Trying to...
Exactly.
Always looking for new ways.
Yep.
New ways to release stories. So
keep us fans up on our toes.
Yeah, that's a nice little nice surprise.
Yeah. So, and more movie news, or rather TV news maybe. We have a trailer for season 3 of Haven. And that looks pretty promising, I must say. And the season premieres on September 21st. It's only a couple of weeks away. And now we are both looking forward to this season.
Yes, ever since you had that interview with the showrunners, I've really been my anticipation keeps going higher and higher, and it's just a combination of I think the writers and the actors have gotten a better grip on the character and how to tell those stories. And of course, the cliffhanger from season 2 was one that's has left us hanging for quite a while.
Yeah.
And in this season 3 trailer, even though it used a lot of footage from previous seasons, there is some new stuff in there. There's a new male character, a black man that we haven't seen before.
Yeah.
And we sort of get the gist of, I think in your interview, the showrunners mentioned that there would be like a clock running for the whole season.
Yeah.
And there's vague references to someone is coming for everyone and everything in Haven, and we only have 46 days. So it looks like a very, very interesting season. And you had some casting news about somebody that you really enjoy coming back as well. That was confirmed, right?
Yeah, the Edge, the wrestler, the Edge, whose real name is Adam Copeland. And I did an interview with him for season 2, and he was a really nice guy. And I liked him in Haven. It's not often that those wrestlers can act as well. So that's an extra bonus.
They use his character properly. I think he works good in small doses. If you had too much of him, then he wouldn't work as well. But yeah, they just use him the right amount and in the right way. So it works out really well.
Yeah.
And so with him coming back, and of course I'm very excited about Claudia back, coming on for 2 episodes. I'm a big Farscape fan, and I really love her character, Aaron's son, on that series. So yeah, I hope I'm not getting too pumped for the season, but I'm really looking forward to it now. I think the show's really hitting its stride, and I'm really hoping for good things this season.
Yeah.
And we have one last thing that's news within Lily's site. He's running his Stephen King book competition, which is a knockout affair, and I think you just finished the first round. Isn't that correct, Lilia?
Yeah, almost the second. As we are recording this on Sunday, September 2nd, I will draw the last ones in the second round. So we will have 15 books left. Face off each other and see who wins.
Now we're getting to the big guns.
Yeah, exactly. And
is the Long Walk still alive?
No, it got kicked out in the first round.
Man.
Yeah, I thought it would do better. No, it got knocked out too early for if you ask me. But we'll see. I guess it and the Stand are still in, and all 4 Dark Tower books so far
have made it.
Yeah, have made it on. So that will be interesting to see if they battle it out.
Yeah, because a lot of people say that the series wasn't the same after the first 4. I was wondering how the next 3 will do.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it's fun, nothing scientific, but fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good stuff. Alrighty, so that's the news for this installment.
This is great. What's our job? We'd like drive around, pick up stiffs or what?
It's time for reviews from the night shift. All right, so we're back with another review, and this time we're reviewing the movie Firestarter, and this is a movie that was released May 11th, 1984. It's, according to IMDb, it has a estimated budget of $15 million, and its North American box office gross was 15.1, which sounds like creative accounting to me. It sounds like somebody was wanting to make sure that they showed that it covered its costs. But and that whole question of the budget is kind of up in the air as well, because, and we'll get into that a bit later, but when we talk about the director of this movie. But Hans, what are your overall impressions of the movie Firestarter?
It was actually quite a few years since I'd seen this one, and
same here.
I liked it, I did, but as with many of these older movies, time hasn't been too kind to it, I must admit. I had little problem with when she set fire, that the hair started blowing, and so I think the special effects could definitely be redone in a better way. But overall, it's an okay movie, and I know I liked it when I saw it back in the 80s. So you have to consider that it's almost, 30 years since it's been released. So if you can have an oversight with those age problems, I think it's quite an entertaining movie, actually. So and there's a lot of known faces in it that you didn't realize was in this one until you saw it again. Heather Locklear's in there, and Drew Barrymore, of course, Martin Sheen, George C. Scott. A lot of good actors are in there. So I quite enjoyed it, actually. But as I said, you have to have oversight with the age problem of it.
I never really have a problem with taking into account the age of a film. And for me, this is like a lost opportunity movie, because as you go through the cast, and I totally agree with you, like this movie has a very, very solid cast with David Keith, who was big in the day, Martin Sheen, obviously, who gave a great performance in Dead Zone as Greg Stillman. He was just fantastic in that movie. George C. Scott, a little bit of strange casting for playing the Indian John Rainbird. If I had my druthers, I would have liked the guy that played the chief in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest to have played this part. And I thought Drew Barrymore did a great job. Yeah, there's some other interesting supporting players in here. The more famous ones would be Art Carney and Louise Fletcher. But I thought they were wasted in this movie. One of the scientists who administered the drugs, Freddie Jones, who has a connection to The Mist through that his son Toby Jones played Ollie Weeks in The Mist. Yeah. We also have Heather Locklear, and I believe this was her first appearance. And there were some bit players, Moses Gunn, who played like the replacement scientist, the black gentleman, as well as a cab driver who, if you remember Starsky and Hutch, Antonio Fargas, he was Huggy Bear on her Starsky and Hutch. So from that perspective, this is a really, really solid cast. Where the movie falls down for me is apparently the original choice of director for this movie. Do you know who that was, Hans?
No, I don't.
It was John Carpenter.
Ah.
But this movie was being put together just around the time that The Thing was in theaters.
Okay.
And because The Thing flopped, according to Carpenter, he lost out on this gig.
Ah.
So that would have been interesting to see his version of this movie. I mean, he did do Christine.
Yeah.
When Carpenter lost out, they brought in a replacement director, Mark L. Lester. You probably know him best for the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie Commando. And he had a cult hit called Class of 1984. Yeah. And apparently when he was brought in, the original script strayed quite a bit from the book. And so one of the things that he did is he rewrote the script and brought it back to the book. And I have to say that this movie follows the book closely.
Yeah.
And for my money's worth, it follows it too closely. I don't know how you feel about that, Hans, but there's certain issues with when you're adapting stories from movies. Sometimes things that work in books don't work in movies. And for me, there's never really a sense of tension or suspense in this movie. Everything seems kind of like there's no passion. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I know.
Like it should be you should be a lot more involved in the story, but even though the relationship between the father and the daughter, between David Keith's character and Drew Barrymore, even though I think they're really good together, I just never really felt emotionally connected to the story. How about you?
I agree. We should get more tied up in the characters than we do. Mm-hmm. And I don't really know why we don't, because we get some background stories, so we know about them, we know what they've been through and everything. Mm-hmm. So I don't really know where it goes wrong, but I agree, something is wrong with it, and we don't really connect with them.
Well, my biggest problem with the film, actually, let me ask you, what's the thing that you had the most problems with the film? Was it the special effects, or?
Yeah, I think that was if I'm gonna pick number one thing that I had some problem with, that was the special effects. Mm-hmm. Today they look really poor, I think. And as I said, they were done 30 years ago, so I don't know. Right. I don't really know if it's fair to say that they are poorly done, because they were probably top notch 30 years ago. But it's I have problems watching old movies. I get hung up on when stuff are badly done, even though they maybe couldn't have been better done when the movie was done. But yeah, I guess that's just me.
Yeah, no, I know that's kind of like the same thing when we were growing up. We were so used to color TVs, color movies. So for us to watch a black and white movie was like, no way, I'm not watching that. Yeah. That looks too old. Yeah. But now, when you get older, you watch those black and white movies, and some of them are really quite good. And actually, some horror movies like The Mist, actually is scarier in black and white because the shadows are so much stronger in that.
Yeah.
But for me, there's a couple of things that are the issue for the lack of tension. Is the biggest thing is it's the score. The soundtrack for this movie is done by Tangerine Dream, and it just sounds like elevator music. It doesn't punctuate any of the scenes. It just doesn't work. And apparently they wrote the score without seeing a single frame of the movie. So like how can that score help the movie make you emotionally invested in it? Like that music is not something that you get pumped up about. It's kind of like music that you want to relax and fall asleep. It's like earth sounds or something like that.
Yeah.
Like it's not a horror movie score at all. I mean, as easy listening music or New Earth music or something like that, it's okay. But I guess this is one of those business deals that they must have had in place, and that Tangerine Dream got the gig for this movie score, but it's totally the wrong music for this movie, and it makes you sleepy.
Yeah, it's almost a little some kind of feel good music.
Yeah,
and I mean,
yeah, exactly.
They're being chased, and you're playing feel good music. So
yeah, like when Charlie starts to use fire powers, there should be something like, I'm thinking almost like the music from Psycho or something like that gets you on the edge of your seat.
Yeah.
I didn't mind the music too much for David Keith's character when he's pushing people with his mind.
Yeah.
That was kind of cool.
Yeah.
But that was probably the best piece of music in the whole movie. And the other issues I think are just around the directing style and the editing. It's not, the pacing is too slow, and shots where you should be close into the characters and getting to the emotion of the moment, it's sometimes the camera is too far away from the actors. I find it's just not shot in a interesting way.
Yeah.
Like it's just there's no passion. Like I don't know if Mark Lester was a fan of Stephen King or whatever, but I just got a feeling like everybody was just doing this because it had to be done and within a certain time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a shame because, again, it's such a great cast.
It is.
It's really sad. And the other thing is, from an adaptation point of view, is there certain things that, as I mentioned, work well in books that don't work well in movies. I think they really did a poor job of selling the relationship between the husband and wife, between David Keith and Heather Locklear, because they only had 2 scenes together, and one was in the school when they were getting the drugs, and the other one was when Charlie set her hands on fire.
Yeah.
But they never had any scenes between the two of them showing them and getting us invested in them as characters. When he finds that she's dead, and we should have been shown that. That would have added to me, seeing her trying to protect Charlie and them killing her. That would have been added a lot of tension to the scene. Yeah, it just didn't work. And the other thing that didn't work for me was, outside of the main cast, all the G-men or whatever that were chasing them, none of them had any personality. So it was just like a faceless blob of people chasing them, and you didn't care. You didn't hate any of them. They were just kind of bland. They were just kind of like there.
Yeah.
So there was no sense of dread, or you didn't hate these guys. You weren't scared of them. So they were just like nameless nothings.
Yeah. That's no good.
So so there was just no danger in this movie, even when Charlie was using her fire powers. So, and the other thing that I missed was the whole thing with John Rainbird. He wanted to look into people's eyes just before they died.
Yeah.
Because he was trying to see what death was like and all that. That's elements totally removed in this version as well. So I call this movie a real missed opportunity, because the cast, the main cast, is pretty solid.
Yeah, I had 2 things that I also didn't like, maybe small things, but annoyed me. One is where Andy has to, when he does his power, he has to hold his face, his head.
Yeah.
And it's like he can't do it if he don't, because it's the one scene where he tries to do it on some of those cops, and they are removing his head and bending them behind his back, and all of a sudden he can't do his power. I mean, it's like he has to have his hands like antennas for it to work, and that I didn't like.
Stop his head from exploding.
Yeah, exactly. and
that's what it looked like. Yeah.
That. And also the ending. It was that kind of movie where as soon as everything is solved, everything goes and turns out so very good. I mean, she just ends up with this older couple, and no one even asks how the hell she can light fires, and she just, let's play mom and dad, and then it's end. So.
And I didn't like the fact that they took her to the New York Times, and I think in the book they took her to the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
The magazine to tell the story. So yeah.
So that's typically one of those unnecessary changes. small changes, but
Yeah.
totally unnecessary. I mean, it can't make a difference for the movie if they keep the same magazine. So
Well, I'm sure it was just a promotional thing. New York Times probably was willing to pay advertising to allow them to use their name
yeah,
or something
yeah.
like that. And Rolling Stones magazine, maybe not, or maybe the people that were at the head of the picture didn't like Rolling Stone magazine.
Yeah.
Who knows? But
Yeah.
there was a couple of interesting tidbits I found here. David Keith apparently was like the 14th choice
Whoa.
for that role. And this is according to Stephen Jones, who did a Creepshow Stephen King book about, which I guess predates yours, was an illustrated movie guide, movie trivia book. So yeah, he was like the 14th choice. I'm going,
My
wow.
God.
And I actually think they got pretty lucky because I happen to think he's a pretty good actor, and he was in his day. But I agree with you, that choice about him holding his head when he was using his power, I didn't like that at all.
It would be interesting to see who those other 13 was.
Yeah, I tried to find some names, but I couldn't. And the other interesting bit of casting news that I found out was that apparently Martin Sheen was a last-minute addition. Do you know who was originally going to play this role?
Yeah, actually I do. Burt Lancaster. I found that on IMDb.
Yeah, same here. So apparently that he just had to have heart surgery just before production started. Burt Lancaster would have been an interesting choice.
That would be.
But
I think Martin Sheen he's actually good in this movie, I think.
Yeah, he's got real poofy hair, but he does pretty good in this movie.
Yeah.
And George C. Scott's pretty good, but I don't think they developed his character enough. I mean, I realize within a 2-hour movie, certain characters are not going to be given or are going to have their story compressed. But see, and this is the problem with adapting a book from a movie, is all these guys are chasing Charlie. I would have had the George C. Scott character involved in those chases, even if he was in the background and they never, like Charlie and her father never saw him, but at least we saw him and knew that he was a threat right from the beginning. He should have been involved in this movie right from the start and building up to that point where he finally meets Charlie.
Yeah.
Then he just comes in the movie a third of the way through and he's like, oh yeah, he's still a bad dude, but he could have been so much scarier if they would have started from the beginning and made his obsession with her a lot stronger. So really sad, because I just watched this movie and it's just a big lost opportunity. And this was a movie that I would love to see a remake of. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I actually think this is one that could be so much better if they remade it. So that would be fun.
Yeah.
Actually, I would
strictly from a special
like
effects point of view.
Yeah, I would like to see a remake of this one even more than Carrie, actually. So.
And the other piece of trivia, they're in this movie, they're being chased by these guys. They're all from the shop, which was also the same agency that was featured prominently in the TV series The Golden Years.
I think King should return to the shop. I think there's more stories to tell about them.
Well, I guess Charlie blew them all up, so
no one left.
No one left. Yeah. So, yeah, just a real lost opportunity, and just sad. When you're watching this, you're just saying to yourself, this could have been so much better. With just a little bit of tweaking, like even just different music. I think this movie would improve dramatically. And also another thing that is really missing in this is a sense of humor. Like, it's very dry. Everybody's taking themselves super seriously. So every once in a while you need to relieve the tension or liven things up with a bit of humor. Yeah. Even though this movie didn't really have a lot of tension, maybe that's why they figured they didn't need any humor. I don't know.
That might be it.
Yeah.
So is this something you recommend? Should people see it?
I would watch it from not a perspective of saying this is the premier adaptation of this work, but look at it from, again, a lesson in how to adapt and adapting a book into a movie, and following the story too closely is not always a good thing. And I think a more recent example of this would be the first Harry Potter movie, which followed the book really closely, but it ended up being kind of a dry movie. And that's the same thing that's happened here. They're trying so hard to replicate the book that they forgot to make it an entertaining movie. Yeah. So I would say from that perspective, but as something for enjoyment and fun, no, I can't really recommend it from that perspective.
Okay. I think people should see this movie.
Okay.
I agree with what you are saying, but still I think it's nostalgia. I don't know if people in the age 15 or around that today will probably hate it. But for us, they'll
fall asleep.
Exactly. But for us who's a little bit older and can remember when this was released and And I remember when I saw this the first time, I liked it more than I did when I watched it now. So I think you should see it again, just for old time's sake.
It's an average movie.
Yeah, it is.
That's the best I can say for it. But, I would just like to see it done again.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, same here. So I hope you enjoyed that review of the movie Firestarter. Oh, and then we should say read the book. The book is so much better.
Yeah. Isn't it always?
Yeah. Well, Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Our second review this time is the latest Stephen King. I guess it's called book, but it's very short, and it was released as an ebook and on audio. It's called A Face in the Crowd, and it's written by Stephen King together with Stewart O'Nan, who he also wrote Fateful with a couple of years ago. And as with Fateful, this is labeled like a baseball book, but to my enjoyment, there wasn't much baseball in it. Being Swedish, I don't know baseball very much, so the baseball part of it is just a setting for the book, and as that, it works without a problem. And I actually listened to this one on audiobook before I read it, and it works great. It's on one CD, so it's not very long. It's narrated by Craig Vasson, who is actually, in my opinion, one of the best narrator of Stephen King books as of now. He has done some others, and he has a perfect voice for narrating books. And same goes for this one. And do you want to comment on something before we go deeper down to the plot of it?
I agree with you. Craig Wesson does a great narration job on this story. I've only listened to it. I have not read it. I know there were some complaints from some people who thought it was too short.
Yeah.
But because I only listened to it, I never really noticed it. I thought the story was just as long as it had to be. And I think it's a really solid story. And it really does a great job of painting characters in a bunch of different characters in a very short time period, which is something that Stephen King is always good at. And I think this is another prime example of his ability to conjure up characters, very vivid characters in a very short amount of writing.
Yeah. The story, and maybe we should say this, that we are going to release spoilers here. So if you haven't read it, you might want to go do that and come back and listen to this after you have read the books. We won't spoil it for you. And if you're still here, you have been warned. The story is about Dean Evers, who's, after his wife has died, moves to a different area, and basically he's all by himself. He doesn't know anyone. He doesn't retire, I think. He doesn't have a job. So he passes his time with watching baseball on TV. And one night when he does, he in the crowd sees, I think it's his dentist, right?
Yes.
Who's been dead for many years, sitting in the crowd. And of course he thinks he's mistaken and it's some son to the dentist or something. But then for each night, someone new who is dead are popping up in the crowd. And basically what's happened is that Dean is dead. And what he sees is these dead people. And he's taking some medicine. I don't remember the name of it.
Ambien.
Yeah, that's his wife's medicine. That's probably gone bad, and he takes it and lies in the bed and dies. But he doesn't know that he's dead, so he goes up and he watches baseball, seeing all these dead people. And eventually he realizes that he's there in the crowd as well, and he's being dead, and all these dead people that he knows are entering the crowds. And I agree with you. It's a good story and it's a solid story. But I have to agree with those who say that it's a little bit too short, I think. I don't think it's so much the story in itself that is too short. It's told in a good time. But what I miss is that you aren't really given the opportunity to start guessing why is he seeing these people. It's revealed so quickly in the book that you don't have the time to start figuring out for yourself what's happening, and that I feel I miss a little bit. So I wish there would have been a little more time before they revealed why everybody was there.
Okay, that's interesting because I think that's done deliberately to surprise you that he's seeing dead people and that he's dead himself. What I really found interesting about the story was, as it starts out, you're very sympathetic towards this Dean Evers character.
Yeah.
See, like in this story, as opposed to Firestarter, here even though Ellie doesn't even have any dialogue, the bond between the two of them is established. You feel that this is a loving couple and they're enjoying their golden years together. They're both moved to Florida 5 years ago. I think Dean was 69 when the story is taking place, and he seems like a very sympathetic character. And then, with each subsequent new face that he sees in the stands at the baseball game, you find out more and more that he's actually a bit of a prick.
Yeah.
And he's not a very nice guy. So I like that how King and O'Nan have played with our conceptions, initial impressions of the character, and at the start, what it was a sympathetic character turns into somebody that has gotten his just rewards, and he's basically stuck in a baseball game which doesn't look like it's ever going to end. So he's in some sort of purgatory, because he mentions there's something like there's been 60 batters in the inning, and it's a no-hitter. So
Yeah.
so I thought that was really well done and surprisingly powerful too. And certain scenes of moments where Craig Wesson, the moment where Dean Evers sees his partner Lenny, and he gets all emotional. Like I almost got emotional myself just listening to him read the story. So, and we find out through the course of the story that Dean blackmailed his former partner. He had a mistress in maybe a indirect way. Him and a childhood friend were probably the cause for another boy from their childhood committing suicide, and that he wasn't a very good father with his son. So I just love over the course of the story how they totally made me do a 180 about my feelings about this character.
Yeah. I agree. It's you didn't expect that when you started listening to the book.
No. So I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah, I did as well. And one thing that I liked is that you can't tell which part is written by King and which part is written by O'Nan. They flow seamlessly together.
Yeah. I really couldn't tell the
difference. Just like King and Straub does with the Talisman.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that.
Yeah.
It's not like in the Tall Grass where at least it feels like there's one person written the first part and another written the second.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know if that's the case. The feeling you get when you read the story.
Yeah, it's pretty seamless. I really couldn't tell. If I was going to be flippant about it, I would say that all the baseball parts were written by O'Nan, but I don't really think so.
Yeah.
I would be interesting to hear who picked what characters. Like, I assume they must have taken turns with writing about characters from the Dean Evers' past, and I'd really like to know. I have a feeling that the business guy and maybe the mistress were written by O'Nan, and the other ones were written by King, but I'm only guessing.
Yeah, I'm guessing the kid was written by King.
Yeah, because that's pretty horrific, and it kind of reminds you a bit of Carrie. Has some Carrie feel to it about this kid being picked on and that.
Yeah. This is, I don't know if we should call it a book, but I guess we will since it's released
I wouldn't
separately.
I'd call it a novella.
Okay, it's novella. But it's one that I really like. As I said, I would have wanted a little bit more time in it. But the story is great. And it's a very good told story. And as you said, the character changes from being someone you feel for to someone you still feel for, but you have totally different feeling. And the relationships between the character Dean and all the people he sees dead are also perfectly described. You get the background, and it's done in a short period of time, but it's done very good, so you really feel, you really get the point of it. So this is something everybody should listen to.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a good story to listen to. It's maybe a little predictable, but because it's such a well written character study that it's definitely worth reading from that perspective. And I like that there's a ray of hope, or maybe you think it's just depending on if you're a half glass full or empty kind of person. But when he talks to his son and tries to tell him to take a time out for his family and just be nicer to people, and like the same thing he says to his friend, be nicer to people. You're hoping that he's passing on something that might break what seems to be like a cycle for a lot of people, or that these people, everybody's the same and that they don't learn from the lessons of their parents, or they turn out to be the very persons that they don't want to be, and that this whole kind of purgatory is going to repeat for everybody. So it's left vague, which I like for you to interpret. Which way do you think it's going to go for Dean Evers' son and his friend?
Hopefully he learns something from his father, but I'm not sure that he will do that.
Hard to say.
I'm not sure that the message is coming through, but hopefully. Yeah.
And that's up for you to decide, which is a good way to write a story. Leave it open to interpretations. So good story. Quite enjoyed it.
And as we said, this book is released as an ebook in which you will get excerpts from The Talisman and Black House. And it's released as a downloadable audiobook and in the US on CD, but US CD is actually the only physical copy of this book so far. That's on one CD. So that's it. And I think you should definitely check this one out. It's a very good story, as we said.
Definitely.
So don't miss it.
Definitely worthy of your time.
Yep, definitely. And in the next podcast, we are going to take a closer look at Sleepwalkers, the movie, in which actually Stephen King himself appears. And we are going to look at the book Knowing Darkness, which is an art book that if you haven't checked it out already, you definitely should. Send in questions, comment about this, and we'll address them in the next podcast. And there you have it. That's it for this podcast. And I hope you have enjoyed it as much as we have. And as usual, if you have any comments, questions, just send them in. We love to hear from you. And especially if you want to send in audio file question, that would be great. So everyone can hear what you sound like. But until then,
stay safe, but stay scared.
can buy a button for Fateful. I have to see what that is. I have the ebook in front of me. I guess we will cut this out.
No way, I'm leaving it in.
What is this about? Miss the Days of Red Sox. Click here to download Stephen King's to announce previous collaboration. Click here to download. Why did I sign? I don't know what I mean by this. It says buy button for Fateful.
Buy button. Is that's just a button?
Buy button.
Buy the book?
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a button you can click on to buy the book. Oh man. Okay.
There's our blooper.
Yep. You can tell I read a lot of books. Okay. Should we do that
sure.
again?
Go ahead.